have you guys ever had a disagreement with someone? You know, you ever argued with a person? Anybody? No? Yeah? Yeah. I do that often, right? But I will tell you, the one thing I've learned about arguing with people is that once I make them mad, this is a clue for some of you guys. You may need to know this. Once you make the other person mad, did you know that they do not hear a word you say ever again? Like the minute they are mad, they have tuned you out, right? And they do not hear anything. I don't care how good you are speaking to them, what kind of logic you have, how much truth you are showing. They have tuned you out. It's over. So I have learned that when I argue with people, it does good if I just keep them just below being mad at me, right? Because then I know the words are getting in there, they're getting in there, and it's there, right? So this is the deal. Sometimes we handle Christianity that way. We come at you with what you're doing wrong, why you're not doing it right, what there is, and the first thing we do is we make you mad. You know, no matter what we say about Jesus after that, you do not hear what we're saying about Jesus. And I think this has plagued Christianity to some extent, right? Once you make a person mad, they're really not listening to you. You have to be cognizant of that because we don't want them, like last week we talked about them covering their ears, la, 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 right? Stephen really upset the Sanhedrin, right? And that was it. They were not listening to him. It didn't matter how much truth he was saying, how much truth we pull out of his words. It doesn't matter because they were not listening at all because they had their own point of view and they were not going to be swayed in that moment, right? And so we just have to look. Sometimes we have to preach that way. Sometimes we have to do. I like football. Anybody like football? I like football, right? So there's this thing that I like to call situational football, right? Because the down and distance and time on the clock, then you have an opportunity to make the right situational call in each of those moments. Even though the goal is to score points, that may not be your objective on that play. And so preaching is like that, right? Preaching is what's your objective? Right? Yes, the objective is that all of us come to Christ. We all do this, but we all have to be situational about how we're doing. And sometimes it calls for a kind word. Sometimes it calls for an act of service. Sometimes it calls for a generosity move. Sometimes it calls for a preaching move. Sometimes it calls for hellfire and brimstone, right? It just depends on what the situation is.